Why doesn't Vagabond have anime? Takehiko Inoue is one of my favorite authors, especially with his slam dunk. One thing to consider is that Gekiga series in general aren't very popular to translate as anime because of the target market. The most popular anime and manga are shonen and shoujo series targeted at younger readers. That's where the money is. Today you mostly have TV series anime, usually in a core or half-core, and that's what's financially viable today. You'll sometimes get weird projects backed by companies like Netflix, but in general, you're not going to see a lot of Gekiga series which tend to be dark, violent, and made to appeal to more mature audiences. In the end, it's about money. Remember that anime generally isn't made to make money. Anime is made more as a marketing tool to push merchandise, like gunpla models, and to raise sales of the source material, like what happened with Kimetsu no Yaiba. The actual anime series itself is usually not very profitable. DVD Blu-ray sales, even for the most popular series, are modest at best. Even Gundam Seed only sold 1 million copies. Gundam Seed is one of the highest-selling anime of all time, but in comparison, it sold some 10 million Gunpla models. Merchandising is where it's at when it comes to anime. That's why Netflix anime is a little weird, because it doesn't follow the merchandising/manga model and is funded by Netflix more to create content to get people to subscribe to their service. Back in the 80s and 90s, Gekiga series would sometimes be made into anime for direct-to-video market. OAVs are a thing of the past though and generally aren't made anymore. In the 90s, they could make an OAV and sell it to a niche market of fans, and this was a workable model back then. In some ways, it's the opposite of the TV anime model. It's anime made to be sold to an existing fan base, rather than to give exposure to a series to a wider television audience. Golgo 13 was like this. It didn't get a proper TV adaptation until much later, and only Gekiga royalty really get TV anime adaptations. That has changed because anime costs more to make these days compared to back then. Standards have gotten a lot higher, and yet economically the world is not as well off as it used to be. It's tougher to get funding. The other problem is with the OAV format. OAVs tend to be short affairs. While you'll occasionally get exceptions like Legend of Galactic Heroes, which was a true labor of love, usually an OAV will only be a handful of episodes, maybe a half-core's worth at best. And that's not enough to cover a story properly. Yokohama Kaidashi Kiko's OAV, for instance, was very short. It was 2 series with a total of 4 episodes all in all, barely covers the content of the manga, and just gives you a glimpse of the best parts of the early series. The animation was also pretty mediocre and didn't do justice to the beauty of YKK's setting. A lot of mangaka in the Gekiga genre back then did not want anime adaptations because of 2 reasons. They felt an anime could not replicate the art properly. Such an anime would usually only be OAVs and would be too short to cover the story. Lots of mangaka were of this opinion. Examples are Hiroaki Samura, who did Mugen no Junin, better known as Blade of the Immortal, and of course Takehiko Inoue himself. And one last point. Many anime are made, as I mentioned, to bring more awareness and attention to the source material. Kimetsu no Yaiba is a classic example in recent memory. Manga sales spiked sharply after the anime came out. Vagabond is one of the best-selling manga of all time, and didn't need an anime to increase its popularity, and it was selling well even in the late 90s, even without the attention of an anime. Of course, a big portion of that attention came from crossover fans of Slam Dunk who wanted to get into Inoue's next work. Buzzer Beater was a terrible manga and anime. But regardless, there just weren't enough reasons to make Vagabond an anime at the time. There were issues around making such an adaptation, and basically, the timing was off. When Vagabond came out in the late 90s, the OAV medium for Gekiga series was already tapering into extinction. Meanwhile, full TV adaptations weren't yet that common. The only ones I can think of contemporary to Vagabond is Gantz, one of the most legendary and iconic seinen of its generation. The first Berserk TV anime came out at the time, but was for an older and more established series, and Golgo 13's TV anime didn't come out until a decade later, when doing this sort of anime became more common. If Vagabond had come out just last decade or so, it probably would have been made into a half-core by now. like how Vinland Saga has been adapted by Studio Wit into an anime. But today, there's so much getting in the way of making a Vagabond anime. That's not to say it won't happen someday. It might still happen. I mean, we got two Blade of the Immortal anime adaptations eventually. The stars just haven't aligned for Vagabond yet. Do you think that Vagabond will someday be animated?